So we want to take some more time now for a closer look at journalism in the age of Donald Trump. Jeffrey Dvorkin is the director of the Journalism School at the University of Toronto. Katy Culver is the director of the Centre for Journalism Ethics, and she is in Madison, Wisconsin. Jeffrey, in Toronto, let me begin with you. No shortage of news in recent months. Now, is this constant coverage, in your opinion, a blessing or a curse?
Well, I think it's certainly a blessing in a number of ways. First of all, this is a story that keeps on giving, and it has garnered a lot of attention in the United States, at the very least, and certainly around the world. And this is a White House that no one has ever seen anything like this. So what this has done for journalism is to give journalism a sense of purpose, certainly in the United States, in a way that it hasn't had for many, many years, maybe even for a generation. So this is good news for journalism. It's good news for the New York Times and the Washington Post, which seem to be in a very interesting, competitive place right now. And competition is always good for journalism.
Katy, let me ask you this question, because we do hear this a lot, that perhaps Donald Trump is getting too much airtime, something I know journalists struggle with, but can he be ignored?
No, he can't be ignored. I mean, this is the president of the United States, one if not the leading superpower in the world. He matters. There was an argument to be made during the campaign that he was overcovered, but I think now we're talking about policies and issues that are extremely important, and so he should be covered. But I would disagree that competition is always good for journalism. Competition can drive some bad decisions in journalism sometimes, including putting things out too quickly.
Jeffrey, I want to ask you this question. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, I agree with that. And I think that that's one of the dangers of doing journalism in the digital era, is that everything can be out there in a matter of nanoseconds. And the idea of having some measure of thoughtfulness and accountability is the thing that is really required now. And most media organizations are having some difficulty doing that, even the Times and the Post.
Katy, I want to pose this question to you because, as you mentioned, competition not always a good thing, but is there also a sense perhaps of a increased camaraderie, because it does seem to be an us versus them mentality in that White House and the press corps, as often the journalists have to stand together and say, no, we want that briefing on the record?
Yeah, you do see some changing of what used to be pretty high walls between news organizations. So you see reporters when a particular journalist won't get called on at a press conference or is accused of doing quote unquote fake news. You have seen examples of other reporters picking up that reporter's question or following up continually, saying the same thing over and over and over again until they get an answer. So I think that's a good sign of some introspection that this may be a new time, and we need to look at our practices and be thinking about how we cover this administration.
Jeffrey, how do you see journalism changing in I guess, perhaps the 6 months since the president was elected?
Well, it's moving at a speed that is absolutely unknown in previous times. I think the challenge will be to figure out ways in which the public can have a say inside media organizations, either with a public editor or an ombudsman. And I think both the Times and the Post are making a big mistake in getting rid of their ombudsman, their public editors, and leaving it up to the internet and the blogosphere to hold the newspapers to account. I think that's a kind of wholesale journalistic accountability that doesn't really work very well. And we'll see what happens when one or the other papers runs into some kind of difficulty and there is a need to address the concerns of the public.
Katy, let me nudge that question along to you. Have you seen the standards higher ever for journalists? Because never have we had a president so keen on calling journalists out on fake news.
This is where I get very, very worried about where we're at. This is certainly an administration that is doing everything it can to delegitimize the press. And we were already in a situation of really foundering trust in news media, other institutions as well. But, journalism really needs to rebuild trust with the public. I think you're seeing some outstanding reporting coming out of outlets like the Times and the Post. But if you look at public opinion polls, you see overall Trump's approval rating dropping, but really not much, if at all, among his supporters. So I think the interesting ethics question of this current age is not just what's the ethical obligation of journalism, but what are the ethical obligations of citizens to be informed, to challenge their own worldviews, and to engage in a really vibrant public dialogue rather than just defend their partisan views.
Jeffrey, coverage of Donald Trump, one thing, but the other thing that's coming out of this is it appears that the White House press briefings are now must-see TV. What do you make of that?
Well, there's a certain O.J. Simpson factor to it. When you see events unfolding in real time live, there is a kind of soap opera quality to it. And this is followed up, certainly on cable news, with the commentariat, putting it together, taking it apart, being instant critics. I think there is a real need for media organizations to understand that as digital fluency expands, news literacy declines. And we need to figure out a way, both as educators and in media organizations, to help the public come to understand how the news works, what to look for, when there are signs that the public is being manipulated. So we need to do some kind of concerted effort to raise the standards of news literacy, not just in the US, but in Canada as well.
And Katy, I'll send the final word over to you to respond to that too, in terms of the must-see nature of a White House press briefing.
Well, I mean, my greatest concern is that the must-see nature, the soap opera nature of all this may disengage the public. When you have this, I mean, Anthony Scaramucci lasting 10 days certainly is an issue, certainly should be covered. But if you set that against some of the economic issues, healthcare in the United States, the Russia investigation, this daily tit-for-tat leaks from the White House, I'm afraid the public is going to feel like they're drinking from a fire hose and they'll feel like they're drowning.
Jeffrey Dvorkin, Katy Culver, great to have this conversation with both of you. Thanks for coming on our program.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.